Hello everybody, I am the Spearman, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction, and today I just saw Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I just came back a while ago. I was really looking forward to this. I wasn't overly hyped or anything, but I really liked the 2014 film so much that, this one definitely had a lot of promise for me. Well, to a certain extent, for what it's worth or whatever. And hope you liked the Snark Spy guest appearance in our last Spear vlog video. Great to have him back, and hope to see some stuff from him soon, eventually. So, this was a good film. Godzilla 2, King of the Monsters, was a good film overall, but it was also a lot lesser than I expected it to be. I'm not saying the 2014 film is the greatest thing ever or whatnot, but my God, it is a masterpiece compared to this underwhelming, lesser, lackluster piece of crap. This is going to be so weird because, I'm going to kind of hammer down this movie despite how good I think it is to a certain extent, but whatever. Millie Bobby Brown is in it, so that means instant success, and we've got her in all the trailers, and we got Vera Farmiga in all the trailers and TV spots. Before I get started, I'll say right off the bat, if you're expecting Millie Bobby Brown's character to play a huge part in this, which I have to admit I kind of was myself, don't expect so much. Her character is barely in the movie compared to the other characters that I'll get to in a little bit. I really was expecting her to have more screen time than she did, to have more of an essential role, and she didn't, except in the end, because why the hell not? She's a character played by Millie Bobby Brown, and you know what? I'm not going to jump into all that other stuff right now. Let's just get started with the story and all. So the story, to remind you right off the bat that this is related to the Gareth Edwards 2014 film, if I'm saying that right. They show Vera Farmiga's character, Emma, and her husband, Mark. Mark and Emma are at San Francisco, of all places, in 2014 when the Mutos are attacking the world and Godzilla is fighting them, and we briefly see Godzilla as he emerges to fight the Mutos and all. And Emma and her daughter, Madison, who's I think she's only 10 or so at the time, they're just looking in awe as Godzilla emerges, and then we briefly see Emma by herself, just wondering and wondering. And then we cut to 5 years later in the present day, when the world remarks on what has happened since then. And since the events of the first film, of the original film per se, is what's been going on is that the secret organization Monarch is not secret anymore. The whole world knows about it, and the secret research has been doing on the monsters, the Titans as they're called in this movie, which right off the bat I gotta say is a pretty lazy title for characters so special as Godzilla and the rest. And there will be a lot of them that we'll be seeing in this movie. I seriously thought it was just going to be Godzilla, Mothra, and Ghidorah, King Ghidorah, but anyway, so the public is, very negative towards Monarch. They want them to release everything they know, everything they've been researching in for decades, since, I guess, the mid or even early 20th century. And, everybody wants Godzilla dead because they believe he's just as much of a threat as the Mutos ever were or the other Titans ever were. I think they're I thought they were called the Kagura or the Kaiju in the original Japanese films, respectively. And that there's literally a whole genre called the Kaiju genre about these giant monsters and so forth. You know, we briefly see the main scientist characters from the other films, Serizawa and Graham, I think. Yeah, it was Graham. Yeah, with they're standing their ground. They're asserting that they're in the right with what they're doing at Monarch. And Godzilla has not been seen in over 5 years since the Mutos were killed, after he disappeared into the water, into the unknown. And after briefly having this funny little breakfast scene where a teenage Madison is doing a terrible job at cooking breakfast while at the same time trying to contact her father. Almost immediately after this, immediately after this breakfast scene, the mother, Emma, gets called over to the science spot in Monarch where a giant egg is being contained and restrained. And this giant egg is alluding to Mothra, the giant, gentle moth creature, per se. And apparently Madison is just allowed to go with her mom anywhere she goes, including these clearly dangerous spots with these monsters and all. We've seen stuff like this in other movies for decades, so why should it surprise us so much here? I think we're not even 5 minutes in, and we're already rushing to these big events, to such a big event as the awakening of Mothra and all. We see Mothra emerging from her egg as a larva, as a mere caterpillar sort of form. And at first, she's terrified of these Monarch soldiers around her, pointing their weapons at her and so forth. And she attacks them, encasing them in webs and stuff. No, it's not webs, but, whatever caterpillars shoot out. Sounds pretty dumb, I don't know it. But Emma uses this special device, which we later learn is called the Orca, which is supposed to manipulate sound frequencies in a way so that that people can communicate with the Titans themselves, with the monsters themselves. And at first it works. Mothra has calmed down. She's feeling very friendly to the humans now, to Emma and Maddie. And but then, before anything else good can come of it, soldiers and scientists alike are being shot from these evil soldiers from off screen, led by this middle-aged British guy named Alan Jonah, I think. Yeah, it was like Alan Jonah. Interesting name. They make Mothra. They scare Mothra again and force Mothra to retreat deeper into the waterfall, caves, and mountains that they were stationed at. We find out later that Mothra has sealed herself in a cocoon, while Emma and Maddie are being taken away by Alan Jonah and his men. Though we don't know that's who they are yet. We don't know the man's name and his soldiers, who they are. Then I think we first cut to Serizawa and Graham attending more trials in regards to Monarch's activities and the legal threats, the humanity threat they present, and so forth. And we're also introduced to this supporting character named something Coleman. Sam Coleman, I just checked. And Sam is, he's kind of like the comic relief. At least that's how it appears at first, where he's just all odd and shy and a bit awkward and so forth, and throwing these little jokes here and there. Really cute. And, Serizawa is saying that Godzilla and the good Titans will ultimately protect everybody, rule over everybody, and will be their pets, or will be Godzilla's pet. And, this head of commission Amanda Waller, voice actress, is not going to have any part of it. I'm positive that's Amanda Waller's voice actress. I can recognize that voice practically anywhere. And since this is a Warner Brothers film, she probably has some contract ties with them or something or other, even after all these years since the Justice League cartoons. And Serizawa and Graham disappeared in the middle of this trial scene, despite Waller's warnings, the head of commission's warnings, like, I hope you know the consequences of leaving this room. Oh, and Sam Coleman's like, oh, well, we're handling business here. Here's some pictures of the good things about Titans, and I hope they're censored. I hope it's the censored version, otherwise you leave a comment with my agent. Weird, but whatever. They now have the news that Maddie and Emma have been kidnapped, and they alert Mark. And Mark and Emma have been divorced for a few years now, at least 3 or so years, because they haven't spoken to each other within that amount of time. Mark is just... I don't think he's with Monarch anymore. I think he's just being a local scientist, staying on the ground away from Monarch and all, but now they need him back. And I'll tell you right now that he's clearly the main character of this movie, and it's not done in the most conventional of ways, I have to say. I don't know, maybe it's because I barely saw him in any of the trailers or TV spots. There was so much marketing material for this movie that clearly pointed to Vera Farmiga's character, to Emma as the main character, which she clearly wasn't. Hell, she was barely a supporting character at that. And let alone Maddie. So yeah, Mark is clearly the central character here, because it's about how he sees things, how he's going to handle things, and so forth, and he just hates the Titans, period. He hates the monsters, period. He wants them all killed. It doesn't matter what Serizawa thinks, or Graham, or the rest think. Even Godzilla has to be killed. And, for Monarch's intents and purposes of keeping the rest of the monsters hidden from the world, over the decades, apparently they've only officially recorded down 17 monsters plus Godzilla, I think, and they say the number is growing. I assume that they must have discovered probably dozens more. And let's see, they eventually realize, I think what they realize, what's revealed to us, is that the bad guy, Alan Jonah, and his men, like, I think they were former Monarch people themselves, or they have ties with some corrupt people in Monarch at certain locations around the world, and they're conspiring against their own company with Alan Jonah and his people to do something very terrible. So Monarch realizes, before they track down where Maddie and Emma have been taken, Monarch realizes that the guy who took them was Alan Jonah, and he's an ex-British military soldier, special forces soldier, I think, who's turned into an eco-terrorist, of all things, for years now, with his eco-terrorist group. So, yeah, and they track them down to this Antarctica base, where this giant three-headed dragon creature is encased in ice, and has been encased in ice supposedly for at least centuries. Maybe not so long, maybe even longer. But, for us, people who know enough about the Godzilla franchise and so forth, know that that's King Ghidorah. And they're trying to free Ghidorah and communicate with it using the Orca. And Mark hates the Orca. He thinks it never should have existed to begin with. The only reason they made it was never to communicate with the monsters. It was to communicate with the whales, with large animals that we're aware of. Prevent them from hunting each other down or to coexist or something like that. It was never ever to communicate with monsters. But Emma went her own way after separating from Mark, and did these sort of things behind his back and behind other people's back, for all that matter. Maddie is, terrified of this whole situation, and Emma, it seems like Emma is just going along with everything to protect Maddie and so that they don't get killed. And then when the good Monarch people arrive, and Mark arrives at this bridge, pointing a gun towards Alan Jonah and his people, where Emma and Maddie are, and there's this female sniper nearby, about to shoot, trying to get a good shot on the bad guys, but Maddie is in front of everybody, and she has the choice to go with her dad or to stay with her mom, but I guess she just backs away behind Emma, I guess because she's afraid of getting her father killed, or getting all three of them killed in that moment. But then something really astounding and confusing happens in the next moment, where Emma has the detonator, has had it for a short while now, and she says, "I'm sorry, run." She presses the detonator, which blows up all these bombs at the precise locations, freeing Ghidorah from the ice he's encased in. And, it's a really good... This probably was one of the best parts of the movie, where Ghidorah is revealed. We don't... It's not too fast, and it's not too slow, which is ironic because, we're only 30 or 35 minutes in, and a lot of stuff has already been happening like that, This movie has horrible pacing, horrible rushing, and it's 2 hours, at least 2 hours, 6 minutes or so, 10 minutes longer than the first film of 2014, which is astounding. It's amazing how much they desperately want to crunch in all this action, when they also desperately need more characterization for their human characters, apart from their monsters, which they don't have. They literally just hammer down in monsters, monsters, monsters. So Ghidorah emerges from his prison or whatever. I keep forgetting that, since Ghidorah has 3 heads, does that technically mean he's 3 characters? I don't know, does each head have their own name and their own personality and so forth? I don't know. He's not a Hydra, that's for sure. And I was kind of looking forward to seeing those 2 twins from the old movies, the Shinjobin, I think they were called. But obviously they're not here for obvious reasons. That probably, if they do try to make that happen in future films, that'd be kind of amazing, just the mere effort of it. But yeah, for a film, even for the movie that this was trying to be, the second Godzilla film, let alone the third MonsterVerse film, they couldn't do that here. They really could, and they made a good call not to, at least not yet. I get a feeling they're going to bring those twins in eventually, have them speak Japanese, but also speak English to communicate, to help everybody. So, shortly after Ghidorah emerges and, kills a bunch of people, and Emma, Maddie, Jonah, and his people escape, that's when Godzilla finally arrives, and yeah, the director himself said that Godzilla was going to have a lot more screen time in this movie. He doesn't. In fact, I'm convinced he has even less screen time in here than he did in the first movie. In here, the most amount of screen time he gets is in the climax. And, that's not good. And what's even worse is that when he does show up, when he's supposed to be there, you can barely see him. Whatever lighting they did on him in the editing and so forth is freaking terrible. He looks like... He practically looks like a poster boy. A very darkened poster boy. And it's... I'm like, seriously? This is how you're presenting him to us in the sequel? We can barely even see him. And he fights Ghidorah, and Ghidorah beats down Godzilla and flies off, because that's what he can do. He can fly with his giant wings, and he can shoot out electricity. He can shoot out electricity beams, which is freaking awesome. And scary, too. So now Monarch is tracking him and realizing that Ghidorah, or Monster Zero as he's called now, I was confused by that at first. Like, don't they know what this thing is called yet? When are they going to? He's going to a big city in Mexico. I forget what it's called. It was like something Mara. And they're evacuating the people in that city before Ghidorah arrives. And they suddenly get an emergency call from Mexico, or maybe it's being broadcasted through Mexico from Boston, which we eventually learn that's where the bad guys are camped out. And the person who's sending them this emergency message is Emma. And to put it simply, Emma's a bad guy. She's been a bad guy this whole time. Like, we're barely like 45 minutes in. We're not even halfway through the movie, and it's revealed to us almost off the bat, that she's the bad guy, and she's been associated with Jonah and his people for a while now. Has been this whole time. And that she's into this whole idea of the monsters, the Titans, will take back the Earth because humanity sucks. It's one of those human sucks sort of motivations where we pollute everything, we destroy everything, and now we have to pay. We're an infection, and the Titans are an immunity thing, are a fighter thing. So they need to. I need to watch this scene again to see what the hell she was talking about. But basically, they're supposed to get rid of us, but at the same time, humanity doesn't die. Something better comes in its place. It's one of those bizarrely ridiculous sort of things. And apparently Emma also fixed up this nice little slideshow to like show us what she's talking about. All these images of like pollution and nuclear factories and stuff, and this other stuff with Godzilla and the monsters, the Titans, doing these horrible things, and the monsters are the good guys. And they also have this special edited thing where you see a destroyed Las Vegas, a destroyed New York, and then you see nature taking over and so on. The movie tries so hard to make it look like she's on this noble quest. She's maybe a bad guy now, but she's on this noble quest. But I'm just sitting there thinking, what the fuck am I stepping into? What the hell did I just step into? I mean, you can't pull something like this off with a character that's barely had even 10 minutes of screen time, especially one that you marketed so much as to be the central character, which she clearly isn't because she's barely shown up in the first 45-ish minutes that we're at now with the movie. So Mark, being the wonderful ex-husband he has to be, tells her straight out, "You're out of your goddamn mind." She's just sitting there like, I'm right. I know this is impossible to understand, but this is the right thing. I think everybody was hounding on her. Even Serizawa, who worships Godzilla, who adores him, adores the monsters and all. Even he was like, this is beyond insane. You can't handle something like this. This will not end well. Even Maddie's horrified. Like, at the beginning of this message, Maddie comes onto the computer screen pretty much to remind us that she's still a major character in this whole thing. Where she's like, Daddy, are you alright? Don't forget, I'm a major character. I'm a main character too. And like, Emma might as well say, no, you're not. Get out of here. I gotta talk to Daddy and be evil to everybody. So yeah, off screen we see Maddie just looking at her mother like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, this is nothing like what she expected. Apparently they had these talks before where her mother seemed to be noble and all, seemed to be good, and probably convinced Maddie the good way of handling this as Maddie sees it, but we don't really know how Maddie sees this whole monsters-human relationship thing because she's barely had any screen time at this point, and we're not even an hour in. All this heavy, really heavy, horrible shit is being dropped onto us, and we're not even an hour in. So much is rushed. It's just horrible rushing. I've already babbled on a bit about all this, and we're not even an hour in the movie yet. We're barely getting to the good stuff, and it shouldn't even be coming this early in the movie. It should be coming probably an hour 15 or so in the movie, after we have more time getting to know Emma and Maddie, and even the bad guys a bit more. Like, most of it is just focused on Mark trying to be the realistic one, logical one, which is basically just destroy all these monsters before they cause any more damage. Okay, so after Emma ends her message with a tearful, "I'm right and you're wrong. Now get to the bunkers. Get to refuge while you still can. Bye-bye." After we see that, another monster shows up, the first of many monsters to show up, and he's another classic Godzilla monster called Rodon. And Rodon emerges from a volcano. He's known as the Fire Demon by the local legends. He rises up and he attacks these Monarch helicopters, assuming them as a threat, but then Ghidorah comes along and then they fight, trying to tear each other apart. And Mark is afraid, like, other things might have happened. He was afraid they were going to mate, apparently, assuming that Rodon was a girl, or one of them was a girl, was a female. But then Godzilla shows up again, and we have another battle where Godzilla tears off one of Ghidorah's heads, and you think he has an advantage. And then the battle goes on for a bit, I think. But then this military group from the U.S., headed by this guy from the first movie, I recognize him from the first movie, who was very much against Serizawa's whole Godzilla is awesome thing. He says, we're going to detonate this bomb, and hopefully it's going to kill both of them. But no, Ghidorah's still alive. He regenerates his lost head, his far left head, and he's now more powerful than ever. Godzilla is dying because of this device, because of this weapon that's been dropped on them, and they were like deep underground, deep under the ocean, deep underwater at this point. And now, at about an hour-ish into the movie, horrible stuff goes down. I mean, Jonah and his people were trying to communicate with Ghidorah. Or no, not communicate. Trying to control Ghidorah. I think that's how Ghidorah showed up in Mexico to begin with, was because they were sending Ghidorah to Mexico. And, but now Ghidorah sends out this call, basically calling all the titans, all the monsters from around the world to come serve him, destroy everything in sight. And Emma is watching all this saying, I'm not doing this. What's doing this? And Jonah quickly realizes, it's got to be Ghidorah. Long live the king. Trailer shot. And so now for the next 5 or 10 minutes we see we see the monsters in Ghidorah destroying like numerous cities around the world. I would probably guess at least dozens of major cities across the world are now being destroyed. And for the next 5 or 10 minutes, we see this happening, and Monarch is freaking out, like, what the hell are we going to do? Godzilla's dead. What are we going to do next? Oh, I forgot to mention, not that you could really notice, because the movie doesn't really make a bunch of a big deal about it, even though she was supposedly a major ally, a very close friend of Serizawa. The British woman Graham does get killed earlier in the movie, back when we were at the Antarctica stuff. When Ghidorah first emerges from the ice, she gets killed off with a bunch of other victims. But the movie doesn't really treat this as much of a big deal, even though she's been with Serizawa for years on this stuff. So, bye-bye Graham. I had to check my phone in the middle of the movie, being like, wait, is she still alive? Did she get killed? Yep, she got killed. And even Rodon is serving Ghidorah now. He's under Ghidorah's spell, mind thing, whatever. Eventually, about an hour and 10 into the film, after they Monarch tries handling some stuff. Wait. I'm getting this all mixed up. I think before this, just before Ghidorah attacks Mexico, there's this sequence where like Monarch actually saw Godzilla swimming underwater towards them because everybody was in this giant submarine, and like I think Godzilla was trying to signal them that he was heading towards Mexico, something like that, with his blue light, with his atomic breath from within him. But whatever. Later on, about an hour 10, hour 15 minutes in, they realize that Godzilla is alive, and Emma goes through this whole redemption thing where she realizes, oh my god, humanity will become extinct if this keeps going. This is not what I hoped for. And Jonah's being all in her face like, hey, we talked about this. This is what you wanted. And I think when the shit was first going down, like, she was literally like, Emma was literally like in between the evil eco-terrorist general and the good daughter, little teenage Maddie over here. And and Madison was trying to convince her not to use the orca anymore, but Emma at that point was still convinced that this was right, before she now realizes that like the horrible shit these monsters were doing, that they were going to destroy the Earth before you know it. Thinking back on it, Emma's kind of a fucking idiot. Which is sad to say, because I know they were trying to pull off this whole redemption arc with her, but we barely had any screen time with her, so how are we supposed to do that? How are we supposed to buy into that, accept that as a good character arc? An hour 15 minutes in, Monarch realizes that Godzilla is still alive, but he needs to heal himself. He's headed deeper underwater somewhere to heal himself. And then, a little past this point, we discover this ancient underwater city that's like thousands upon thousands of years old, of this ancient civilization, this very ancient civilization that worshipped Godzilla, worshipped the monsters, because they were the first gods. And, there's like this nerdy scientist guy in Monarch who provides some quick jokes here and there too, and is very fearful of the monsters, but at the same time he's trying to accept them in a weird way. And this Chinese woman, I think, or Vietnamese woman, she's literally like the granddaughter of the Chinese Vietnamese woman from Con Skull Island. I thought it was the same actress, and I checked, but it's not. It's just someone who looks similar, with short hair, and she had that funny moment, like, after Emma's bullshit message, where she's like, that beach! The people were laughing at that. And there's a funny moment earlier where Maddie's in an elevator with Jonah, and she pretends to scratch her face, but she does it like this. Very subtle, very clever. So now, in this underwater city, they realize that Godzilla is healing himself with this radiation source, but it could take years for Godzilla to fully heal himself. And obviously, since Ghidorah and the monsters are destroying the world, it's barely been a day or so, and dozens of cities have already been destroyed. They have to work fast, or else the entire world could be destroyed within a matter of days at most. So they decide they need to fire some nuclear weapon or two to power up Godzilla. But because of the fight they had in Mexico earlier with Ghidorah and the others, their weapon systems are offline. So Serizawa decides, I need to detonate these nuclear weapons manually and right next to Godzilla, which means he's gonna die. And I'm sitting there like, he has to die. Of course he has to die, because he's the noble Japanese supporting character who's been in both films, and he may as well have been the starting character in the first film, apart from Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who they tried so hard to make the character of the first film. But even then, I was like, nah, I think the Serizawa guy is clearly the main character. So Serizawa goes into the underwater city, begins the countdown to set these nukes off to power up Godzilla at the cost of his own life because he's not going. There's no time for him to escape. You know, these nukes have to be detonated within a certain time limit under certain circumstances, and there's no chance of escape for whoever sets them off. So he goes up to Godzilla. He takes off his helmet. I mean, I think they're still underwater, right? Or maybe they're in some part that's above sea level. And so he can take it off and he can go up and say in Japanese, fuck, I forgot what the Japanese word for goodbye is, and I don't think that word was used here, but basically he says, sayonara, sayonara, tomoeo. Goodbye, my friend, my old friend. And then the nukes set off, and Godzilla emerges from the water, fully healed, and he releases an atomic breath like, "I'm back, bitches!" And and Mothra is joining up too. The whole reason that Monarch was able to find Godzilla in the first place was because Mothra came from her cave. She flew out of her cave as a fully grown butterfly monster, gentle monster with a glowing light, and she was letting off this sound like she was singing. The chain woman said it was like she was singing. I forget what her first name was, but her last name was Chain. I'm sure I remember that. So now Godzilla's back, and he sort of kneels down. He recognizes the humans as good guys, like, okay, well, cool. I'm gonna go to battle. He turns around and heads towards Boston because while this is going on, Maddie, playing the important character, playing the important role she has to play at this point. At first, she has a sort of back talk with her mother. Like the moment that her mother made this bullshit speech of if everything's going to get destroyed but humanity's going to survive sort of thing, I was thinking right there and then, girl, you need to get out of there. You need to turn against your mother, like, right now. But for some reason, she stays. And then we have this scene where she's, like, talking to her mother without turning back, saying, "Don't want to talk. I know everything didn't go exactly as planned," and blah, blah, blah. "I had no choice." Then Maddie turns back saying, "Bullshit! You said we were doing this for Andrew. Do you really think this is what he would want? When were you doing this for Andrew? When were you doing this for your dead brother that we barely talked about, we barely alluded to?" I mean, like, there was this one quick home movie that was played much earlier in the film where there were two children playing with their parents, a little Maddie and a little Andrew, and I don't think they ever said how Andrew died, whether it was because of the San Francisco crisis or not. In 2014, like, this is barely touched upon, and it is so cliched and lazy. That's how forgettable it is, because they barely touch upon this. They barely make this an important point, and then Maddie just throws this out of nowhere, saying, "We were doing this for Andy. You said we were doing this for Andrew." Like, for what? For his memory? Like, how did he die again? What did he die from? I mean, I checked the plot summary on the wiki page, and I don't think it even said why they were doing this. It's their lazy attempt at character drama, and it's so poorly executed, among other things in this movie. This movie feels like one giant action flick with a lot of disjointed points. I mean, I already read online that the critics had mixed feelings about it, because even though the action sequences themselves look great, the plot, the background plots with the humans and stuff was very thin, and I can definitely see why. This is definitely my least favorite of the three films, and we're just about an hour and a half in at this point when, while Godzilla is being fully healed and Maddie has this talk with her mom to piss off, to fuck off, whatever, she finally decides to sneak off, and she does it in the clever way you have to when you have to get to the point of these things. She escapes the base. We see that they're in Boston. They were hiding in Boston this entire time, because why not? But compared to the Big Apple, San Francisco, and other cities, Boston is not really used much in movies as far as I know. She sneaks off to Fenway Park, where all these people are being evacuated because, you know, the authorities in general were suspecting that Boston was going to be a next potential target, major target. she sneaks into the Fenway Park Stadium, the radio rooms and stuff, and she uses the Orca to send a call out to bring Godzilla, Ghidorah, and the others here so that they could fight each other. And then, I think, not sure what, and the Monarch catches on to this. They realize that's where Godzilla's going, that's where King Ghidorah's going. They know what Ghidorah is now because Chang finally looked into these ancient texts and stuff from these past peoples who called the monster Ghidorah, and that he's apparently an alien monster. He's not naturally born from Earth itself. He's from space, and he's supposedly been trying to conquer the whole Earth for millions of years, but has always failed because Godzilla was there to stop him, and they are eternal enemies and so forth. That was probably one of the best parts of the film, and that's only saying so much, what they were trying to do with this whole nemesis relationship between Godzilla and King Ghidorah. Ghidorah comes to Fenway Park, finds where the Orca is, and tries to destroy it, almost destroying Maddie in the process. And, Emma abandons Jonah and his whole cause behind to save her daughter, because now she's a good guy now, she's redeemed and all. Finally realizes that the bullshit was not worth it, and goes off. And best of all, Jonah and his people just let her go off. They barely try to stop her. They point all their guns at her. She points her gun at Jonah, about to blow his head off, but then he's just like, we got what we need, and then just lets her go. And he doesn't even come back. He doesn't have any other part to play for the rest of the film, and I thought he was going to, or they were going to try to do so, but that's for much later on, like literally at the very last minute of the film, of the credits, which I'll get to in a little bit. So now we have the big fight, and honestly at this point, I was just so fed up with the pacing, with the stupid Russian of this movie, that I was trying to stay awake, like, oh god, will you just get interesting already? Oh, we got the big battle. Godzilla, go get him. Ghidorah's getting screwed up. The context was just so ridiculous at this point. It felt almost pointless, or at least it was ridiculous to a certain extent with the human characters, because I didn't feel enough of a connection with them, especially when it came to the villains. I mean, Jonah was a pretty standard enough villain. He keeps reminding us that humanity sucks and the monsters have to destroy, obliterate everything, including as many humans as possible, for Earth to go back to its nature roots and so forth. But then when it comes to Emma and Maddie, who again were built up as these very, very central characters in the marketing material, they were barely in it. By the time the climax comes, they probably were only in 20 or so minutes at most, which is not much in comparison to what they were trying to build up in the marketing stuff. So whatever, we have this big final battle, about an hour, 35 minutes in the movie, and it goes on for quite a bit, for at least 15 or 20 minutes. And the Monarch people realize that what Serizawa did worked a little too well, and Godzilla's just going to blow up in like 12 minutes after a certain point, and they need to finish evacuating the whole city within that time, and to help Godzilla as best they can in the meantime with their helicopters and all. And it just hit me, like, if Godzilla's about to blow up, shouldn't you get out of there too at a certain point? Whatever, I was struggling to stay awake at this point because I was just so bored by the humans and other things at this point. Eventually, when Godzilla is all nuked up and stuff, he doesn't explode, but he somehow manipulates the energy just to send off these Ultima blasts or whatever through his body, like through his whole body. He's like literally releasing massive waves of nuclear energy at Ghidorah. Ghidorah keeps trying to destroy the Orca because he knows that as long as the Orca exists, other humans could potentially control the other monsters, take control of the monsters away from Ghidorah. I guess the other monsters were on their way, but they didn't show up in the final battle until after it was over, which we'll get to in a second. But Rodan shows up, and so does Mothra. Mothra tries to help Godzilla fight off Ghidorah and Rodan. And Rodon is neutralized for a bit by Mothra, but then Ghidorah kills her, and Mothra, even though Mothra is destroyed, she still heals Godzilla after Godzilla is beat up again. Severely this time, I guess, but whatever. Like I was saying a second ago, Godzilla, now fully nuked up, releases massive amounts of nuke energy from the dark, shadowy place he is. Again, just like in the earlier parts of this movie, we could barely see his face, let alone his whole figure. I thought the lighting on Godzilla was terrible in this movie in comparison to the first movie and the trailers we saw before this. So he releases more and more waves of nuclear energy, and bit by bit, Ghidorah gets destroyed more and more. He piles himself up, is forcibly backed up more and more, and he shrivels and shrivels until he's literally just dust, nothing but freaking dust. And now we're about at just before 2 hours 5 minutes, where the battle's over and the sun is coming in, like, let the sun shine in. And then all these monsters that we saw from earlier in the film that were destroying everything, like this giant mammoth creature, and this giant spider-like creature, and this other stuff. I have no idea if there are other classic monster characters from past films over the decades, from the glory ages of man in suit films. But whatever, they all come and they gesture towards Godzilla in gratitude, and then they bow towards him, and Godzilla's just looking at them like, hey, did what I had to do. Thank you, we did what we had to do. These humans are weird, but they're worth the sacrifice, they're worth the fighting. And then Rodon comes up, and it totally did not hit me that Rodon was also under Ghidorah's mind control until after the movie was over. But yeah, Rodon comes up, and he gestures too, like, you saved us all again, and we are in your debt. They all bow to him, and then Godzilla roars again and gives a final triumphant roar as the title comes in and says Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Oh, and apparently Emma died a bit earlier, but so she sacrificed herself for the greater good by distracting Ghidorah and so on, and say, long live the king, just hailing tribute to Godzilla, whatever, but who cares? Maddie, Mark, and the rest got away fine. They played their part, however extensive or essential that was. And the movie's over. But we do get a post-credit scene, and it's a good one, for what it's worth. We see Jonah and his troops like sneaking around the same Mexico City from the midpoint of the film earlier. And they find the cut off head from earlier, the head that Godzilla ripped off. You know, it's still around, even though King Ghidorah, resurrected that head. That sounds weird to say, resurrected a head. Like a Hydra, in a sense, the first head, the original head per se, is still alive. Well, is still intact. It's not destroyed. It's there, and Jonah just looks at it with a really sinister smile, simply saying, we'll take it. And cuts to black, and the movie really ends, and I thought to myself, I literally said out loud, well, that's how Ghidorah's coming back. That's how King Ghidorah's coming back. We haven't seen the last of King Ghidorah. And the movie's done. There's not much else to say about this movie at this point. Just how utterly tedious it was and excessively action-packed it was. I mean, I get what they were trying to do with King Ghidorah controlling all these monsters around the world and almost causing an apocalypse that could literally be done and over with like that before you know it. I like that they were trying to do that, but like that whole apocalypse thing starts like barely halfway through the movie, and all this other heavy shit already happened during the first hour or so of the movie where Emma turns into a bad guy, and we barely had any screen time with her, barely had any foreshadowing or whatever to allude us to that's what this was leading to, and we barely had any screen time with Maddie as to what her character was all about and why and why she was such a we had to root for her, and why she was such an essential role for the climax, where she would lure all the monsters to one place to battle it out, or at least for Godzilla to battle it out. And when she sees Godzilla behind her, and see Godzilla come back, she's like, yeah, this is shit's getting real. Even though she had no idea that Godzilla supposedly died and then came back like a freaking Jesus monster or whatever. And then I know I keep saying this over and over again, but the whole marketing stuff. If Mark is supposed to be your main character, then you should focus on him in your marketing stuff, and not so much on these other two characters that are clearly there just because of their star names. I am convinced that they just exploited Millie Bobby Brown's popularity with Stranger Things and everything. Like, hey, we got the Stranger Things girl, and she's a main character, but not really. She's barely in 30 minutes of the film, or not even that, before the climax. The most amount of screen time she has is in the climax. Even then, she's barely doing anything except running around and getting the orca away from Ghidorah and all. And we got Vera Farmiga. You remember her from Bates Motel. And yeah, I remember her from Bates Motel. She was great in that, but what are they trying to do with her here? Why did they expect me to like this whole mother-turned-villain-turned-hero story arc when they barely focus on her? The same in comparison to the father character, Mark, who, he wasn't the best character or whatever, but he clearly had a complete, full character arc where he hates the monsters so much, hates Godzilla so much, but he comes to understand them better as he works with the Monarch people to bring everything together and have Godzilla ultimately play his role as king of the monsters, literally, where all the monsters serve him as where he's the noble leader to keep balance between the monsters and the humans. And I mean, I liked Mark a lot more than Emma. I liked him a lot more than Maddie. They were barely in the movie, and I don't know if Millie Bobby Brown has something in her contract where she has to come back in the sequel or future film. I mean, despite how pointless Maddie was, per se, to a certain point in this movie, I do want her to come back. I want Millie Bobby Brown to come back because they barely did enough with her, like they suggested they were going to in the trailers and all. Like, come on, you have Millie Bobby Brown. She's such a big deal on Stranger Things and these other things. So do something. Do more with her than you're doing here. A lot more. And, do a bit more with Mark. I like Mark most of all out of these three characters that I keep bringing up again and again. So, whatever more you can do with him, do in the sequel or the next couple sequels, and maybe have him killed off in a noble way like you were doing with Emma. I mean, I'm kind of glad that she died. She died a noble death to redeem herself for her stupidity actions earlier in the film, letting all these monsters loose and not thinking the obvious extent of damage they were going to cause. I know some people really hate longer movies, but this movie really needed to be longer. We needed more time with these characters before Ghidorah showed up, before Godzilla himself showed up, before even Mothra showed up. I mean, Mothra was introduced to us barely 5 minutes in. Not even 5 minutes in, I think. I think I was looking at my phone, and it was only 3 minutes. We were only 3 minutes in, and Maddie and Emma were already heading off to this place to see Mothra. I'm like, what the hell? Am I on speed dial or something? For God's sake. Take your time. Take it slow. Don't rush things. And it's not any better when Mothra's whole birth and everything is so fast. It's like she's coming, she's out. Well, okay. And the bad guys are here and they're attacking, and she's getting all scared, oh, I guess this is happening now. And Jonah was a good villain overall. I mean, I'm sure we've seen this sort of villain plenty of times where they're total anarchists or total eco-terrorists. They want everything gone, so either humanity can be completely destroyed or it can be nearly destroyed so that it bonds with nature better and it procreates with nature. I guess I'm not too familiar with the eco-terrorist sort of villain to be sure how this should have been handled, but I like what they're trying to do with him. They're clearly trying to set him up as this major villain that's going to keep trying to use the monsters to destroy everything, everywhere. There's also this part in the climax where, like, when they're first trying to find Maddie and they realize she's going home, she's going to their house in Boston. Like, I think that's the last place you'd want to be going right now when these god monsters are fighting each other literally down the street. They're literally down the street and she's going to this house. Like, I guess she's expecting her parents to come and pick her up, but girl, that's like the last place you should be right now. You should be getting the fuck away from the fucking city. Why are you still there? And it doesn't help much better when you're about to be killed by King Ghidorah and you're just standing there just screaming like, ah! I'm Jane, I'm 11 from Stranger Things, and I scream! Like, that's definitely going to mean something. It made a lot more sense when she was hiding in her house behind her door with her hands behind her ears, screaming as all this action's going on, like, ah! I'm sure if I saw the movie again, if I saw it on Fire Stick or something, I could go on and on with nitpicks and how this and that doesn't match. This did have a lot of promise, but it did not extend on things even closely enough. Even the action scenes, especially before the climax, which they clearly tried their hardest to make sure it was jointed right. Even the climax scene felt like it was rushing a lot of action, not giving enough time with the different abilities, the different things that Godzilla and Ghidorah could do with their power, with their physical abilities and so forth. There's just a lot more this film needed in order to be a complete film, and it barely feels like half a film. It barely feels like a complete film, period. I mean, I'm glad I saw it, but there's just so much missing in this movie, so much more that was to be needed, and worst of all, I am really concerned with the Versus movie that's coming out next March, like not even a year after this movie's release. We're going to have Godzilla versus Kong, and I'm not sure exactly what they're doing here. It's very hazy right now exactly what this next movie is going to be like. Is it going to be in ancient times, or is there going to be a flashback section that takes place in ancient times and the rest is going to take place in modern day or in the 70s or something? I'm not sure what's going on there, but since that's literally coming less than a year after this movie's release next spring, I'm really concerned with how that's going to turn out. And as far as Kong Skull Island is concerned, I did really like that movie. I very much like the 2014 Godzilla film. I came to appreciate the Kong movie a lot more after seeing it another time or so. Just like with the 2014 film. I think the 2014 film was great. I don't care what people say about, oh, you don't see enough of Godzilla. Well, that's clearly what they're trying to do with that movie. They're putting you in the victim, in the civilian's perspective, not the monster's perspective per se. And here, it's like they were trying even harder to put you in the civilian's perspective, and they were not balancing out between the human's perspective and the monster's perspective. I thought Godzilla himself was going to be his own character, because even though he had a limited amount of screen time in the 2014 film, he still was a major character. He had a very strong, powerful presence there. And here, apart from the climax before the hour 35-minute point where the climax for the final fighting begins, he's barely in the movie. And every time he shows up, it's like they chose the cheapest ways to make him appear the way he does, and then they made an even bolder decision to make it very darkened around him so you could barely see him, probably so that you couldn't see how cheaply he was made in comparison to the 2014 film. I don't know. I could go on for if I had the time, if I had the movie right now on Fire Stick or something, I could go on forever about what works and doesn't work. I wish this movie could have been a lot better. Again, I really like the 2014 film, despite what people say. I think the Khan Skull Island film is a pretty solid film, and I'm looking forward to more Khan stuff in the future. This film could have been a lot better, but it had so much missing, so much needed for it to be a complete movie in my eyes, with proper balance between action and character per se. But that's how the movie turns out, and then, of course, last but certainly not least, I am really concerned for the Godzilla vs. Kong movie next spring. I hope it turns out as good as this one turned out, despite the mess it turned out to be, despite its messy qualities, but hopefully it will turn out better, that much better. I guess in comparison, this is slightly better than Batman vs. Superman. I was getting some BVS vibes off of this, where like they were trying so hard to do one thing, but tried more, accomplish more with other things, but this movie was good overall. The most I can give it is a C+ at the most. I hope that in the future, when I see this movie again from time to time, that I can appreciate it a bit better, or just appreciate it as much as I do now, and hopefully not look down upon it even more than I do now, and put it and rank it even lower on my list. But for now, this movie is a solid C, and despite all its problems, and my God, are there a lot of problems, a solid C is fine enough. This movie is fine enough. The other movies in the past few years, the other two movies in the past few years are better, and hopefully Godzilla vs. Kong will be a lot better in comparison. And that's Godzilla, King of the Monsters for you. Thank you for spending this time with me. This has been a pretty intense Spirit vlog to make, because I'm just really trying to comprehend what I just saw and what issues I have with it, but also what good things I liked about it. But you know, that's part of the whole reviewing new movies sort of experience, and it's going to get better and better along the way. So thank you so much again for spending your time with me, guys, with listening to my thoughts on the new Godzilla movie. I am the Spearman, the embracer of human good and analyst of fiction, and look more to more Spirit vlogs, comic news videos, and a lot more Amateur Master stuff, including our first Snark Spy videos very soon. Okay, take care, everybody. Goodbye.